I would like to say that unfortunately today will be my last class for the next little while. Um, for the foreseeable future, actually. My work just got way too hectic, and I would love to keep teaching you, but I just don't have time in my schedule, unfortunately. So I wanted to say thank you for all coming to my class, and thank you that you have um, put up with my technical difficulties and um, yeah. I have really enjoyed seeing you guys follow along with me. And yeah, I also want to say that if you ever want to reach out for supply suggestions or anything, I'll put my email um, in the chat so you guys can email me at any point. Um, yeah, so we're going to get started in a minute here if you want to take a photo of what we're making, but we are continuing from last week. And yeah. All right, so we are going to get started. If you remember last week, we did the sketching for this drawing, and now we're going to be doing the inking for it. Um, yeah, so we are going to get started in just a second here. Um, and yeah, so for today, you will mainly need the inking brushes that we've been using and an eraser. You might need a pencil a little bit for like touch-ups of things of your sketch. Um, You can see I kind of added just a little bit from last time. So I'll show you how to do that really quickly, including the floorboards that I added here. We didn't add those in last week, so I'll show you how I did that. And then we will get started on some inking. Yeah, so the floorboards are fairly simple to add in. Um, the main thing you need is a ruler, like we've been using last week, and I don't have a ruler at my desk at the moment. Um, but this is a great example of you can use any straight object. So this is the lid of a box for a pen. And I'm doing the same that we did last week with lining it up at the perspective point that we had and just drawing lines for some floorboards here. So I'm doing them just a little bit apart, but you can see I didn't add any here because we won't see the floor. So I'm doing them just where we're going to be able to see them and adding in just a few here. So this is just adding some more texture and some more variation to our floor. And you can see that they're kind of uneven, but it's all right because it's just a floorboard, which is nice. Um, yeah, so if they look a little bit wonky or not straight or uneven in size, then just chalk it up to a rustic look for your floorboards. So One of the supplies that I use the most that I have not really shown you guys yet, but this is something more of like if you do want to get into inking, this is something I would suggest, and it is called a kneaded eraser. So it's an eraser that you can like stretch and mold, and it's really helpful for when you're doing pencil like this, as it lightens up your sketch just enough so that you can kind of still see everything, but it just lightens it a little bit. So this is something I use for a lot of my inking, and you can do it with your eraser as well, just going in very lightly. But if you wanted to get into inking, I would suggest getting a kneaded eraser as it is very helpful, but it just lightens up your lines a little bit, and the eraser can do the same. So I use the flat side of it, and I just go in small circular motions over things that I need to lighten a bit, and it will smudge a little bit, and I just go in with a little bit of a harder edge and erase lots of that smudging. So you want to get lots of your line work or your pencil work pretty light. So using an eraser just a little bit over the really dark spots can help when you're inking. So it just lightens things up just enough so you can see it, but it's not going to um, be too hard to see the difference between your pencil and your inking. So we are going to start inking in just a minute here. Um, yeah, and like always, I'm going to be using the bold brush pen um, that we've been using for this whole unit. For this one, I did use the medium brush, so I will talk a little bit about the difference between the two and comparing them a little bit. But yeah, so we are going to start out with our lamp here. So starting kind of in the middle, sometimes I like to do that where it just the focal point or the middle of your page is kind of inked first and then going out around it. Um, when I'm working with pens that smudge, though, I like to work right to left, but that's because I'm left-handed. So another thing, if you have a brush that you know is going to smudge, go from one side of the page to the other, depending on your hand. But because I don't really worry about this pen smudging, we start kind of in the middle here. So I'm going to start by outlining our lamp here. And I'm just going around, going a little bit thicker on this bottom line and a little bit thinner towards the top of our lamp here. And you can kind of add details however you like. So on this lamp, I'm going to add a little bit of a rim to either side. So I'm just adding in another line on the top and bottom. The next step here is going to be outlining the base of our lamp. So I'm going to start just outlining from the top of it to the bottom. And something I like to do, so if this is your light source and you want to add in some like shadows or some naturally forming shadows, start with a thinner line on the top and make it a little bit thicker towards the bottom. And that just helps add some weight to the bottom of what you're drawing and some natural shadow. So I'm just outlining this. And then in just a second, we will add in some shadows to it. So our lamp here is our main light source of our drawing here, and that's why I kind of wanted to start with it so we could talk about where the shadows go based off of the lamp. Um, so in this one, um, let's see, do I have a red pen here? Nope, but I've got a highlighter. Okay, so for this lamp, if this is the light source, you can see the light would be hitting it here on top of this circle and on the top of this circle. It would hit the couch here and here. This is just to help you visualize how the light is going to work in our piece. It would hit this pillow. This would be our major light source. And you can see how it would hit lots of things. And this is something that if I have a sketch separate from my good copy of art, I will do this for a lot of things. For most of my pieces, this is a middle step between my sketch and my final product. And I do this with an iPad or a separate piece of paper where I go through and I show where the highlights would be and where the shadows would be. So anywhere where there's yellow, we want to leave as light as possible. And you can see how things are going to kind of go together. So anywhere where there's not really that much light, we are going to be doing more darker shadows. This is not all of the shadow or the light that we have, but we're going to go from here. So in this context, when adding in shadows to our lamp, I'm going to add them in on the lower half of these spherical shapes. So where the light is not going to hit as much. And from here, we're going to add in our table. So I'm just outlining our shapes. And I'm going to add a little bit of a thicker line around this lamp base to show just a little bit of a shadow close up. And I'm going to add some lighter lines just around it to show the shadow kind of almost diffusing. So it looks a little bit more soft on the edges. So I'll hold it up a little bit so you can see a little bit clearer, possibly. So you can see I just added a couple of little lines around my shadow, and that just helps it look a little bit softer. So after adding in our table here, I'm going to draw in the back of our floor behind this table. And this is going to be another shadow that we're adding in, and I'm going to add it in under the table. So I'm drawing lines between the legs of the table here, and I'm going to just color in this section. and add in some of those light lines around the outside as well. So in just a sec, we're going to start on the couch. And again, I'm going to show you how we kind of ink the outside of it and then add in our shadows. And I'm going to show you some of the texture that I would add in personally, working in my style. So we're going to start off with the outside lines of our sketch. And for this part, I'm just going around and adding in an outline to everything that we have added here. And again, I'm doing thicker lines towards the bottom and thinner lines up at the top. And you can also add like a swoopy line in the middle, and that just shows a little bit of form to the pillow. So it's not completely flat. All right, so we're going to add in some shadows here, and we're going to start by just adding in a shadow behind this pillow and behind the arm of the chair here. So I'm actually going to color in a good chunk of this couch cushion and sort of flick my pen at the edge of this to get a little bit of a softer shadow edge. And I'm also going to add shadow to this couch cushion here. And do the same edge for it. So just flicking my pen out. So the next shadow we are going to use is using a technique that I talked about in the booklet that went out at the beginning of this class that we actually have not had the chance to use yet. So the technique is called double lining, and it's when you want to put something that's in shadow next to something in shadow without losing your detail. Um, so for this arm of the chair, that's going to be mainly in shadow. I'm actually going to outline just around the outlining that I have here. So on the inside, I'm just going around very carefully and adding a second line to my line art here. And I'm just giving a little bit of space between them so that when we add in our shadows, we are not losing any of the detail of our line work. So this is a technique commonly used in comic books, and it's most of like the white lines you see on very dark objects are done with this technique where you're almost drawing in a white outline instead of a black one by leaving that space in between them. So when I go and color this in, you can still very clearly see the outside of this shape without coloring all the way to the edge. And I'm going to do this technique for this couch cushion as well. So again, just going around the outside of your or the inside of your line work. But rather than going around the whole shape, I'm only going to go around about half of it, as this is going to be a little bit of softer shadow, you can see here. So I'm only going around part of this shape, like so, and then adding in my major shadows. And then once again, flicking that line work out so you get just a little bit of a softer shadow. And I'm also going to color in the chair leg here, except for a thin line that I've left on the far right side, like so. And that's just for when we put the shadow under the couch, you'll still be able to see a little bit of definition on that part. So the last little addition to this couch that we are going to make is just adding in a little bit of texture. And for fabric things, I like to add in kind of woven texture to it. Um, so I'm just grabbing a sketchbook to show you on a little bit of a bigger scale what I'm doing. And so if I were to, like, if this whole page was my couch, I would add in some very quick lines, making a crosshatch pattern like so. And this just looks a little bit like worn fabric. So we're going to be doing this on a much smaller scale, but just adding in a couple of little spots of it on your couch makes it just look a little bit used. You don't have to add in this texture. This is something that I do with the style of art that I like to make, but just adding in some patches of like use makes it look um, less new and a little bit more like lived in a way. Um, yeah, when we ink the carpet, it'll be a little bit more forward that we're doing this texture, but just adding a couple of lines can make your couch look a little bit less perfect. And right now I'm just thickening up some of my line work where I know shadows would appear. So in between these two couch cushions, I'm thickening it up just a little bit. Um, yeah. So there is our couch. And we are going to move on to the window here in just a sec. So um, for the window, we have some overlapping parts. So we have a curtain rod in front of our window here. And so we're going to start with the curtain rod first. With lots of like acrylic painting or oil painting, you want to start with the background, but with lots of inking, you want to start with what's on top rather than what's underneath. And that's just so you can see how things go underneath each other better. Because you can't really go over ink unless you have white ink. So you want to start with what's on top so you have fewer mistakes or fewer lines that cross that they shouldn't. Um, yeah, so we're going to start out with our curtain rod here. And so I'm going to start by adding in our main line of our curtain rod. And you can see I twisted my paper just because it's easier for me to draw a line straight going this way than it is to draw it this way. So it's mainly a comfort thing when I'm inking that I move my page a lot. Um, yeah, so for the curtains, I'm going to start with adding in some little like ring shapes to the top of it as the rings that hold up the curtain. So I'm just adding like little C shapes around our curtain rod here. And then I'm going to connect them a little bit with a line, and that's the top of the curtain. And then drawing straight down from either side of the end of it. And then adding in a wavy line at the bottom. And to add in some folds, I'm going to just draw lines where the wave is like upward. So in between kind of those two bumps of a wave, I'm adding in those lines. And I'm going to add just a little bit of that fabric texture to the curtains as well. So adding in the window is fairly simple, just outlining all of your pencil lines. And finding the easiest way for you to make a straight line for things is the best way to get things looking the most flat. So I find it much easier to draw vertical straight lines than horizontal straight lines. So that is what I mainly do. But the other thing is that I have filled up full sketchbooks like this thick with just practicing straight lines and shapes and things like that. That was something that I did when I was learning dip inking, was I just did as many straight lines as possible so I get the feeling of it, and it's much easier to draw them now than it was when I started. And that's something I would suggest doing quite often if you are going to do a lot of inking is like getting the feel for your pen is the most important part. So doing lots of straight lines and doing lots of different shapes and using it as much as possible is the best way you're going to get better at it. So from here, we're going to add in our floor, and um, I'm just going to outline the lines that we have put in here. And one thing I didn't add to this one that you can add is also some lines across them to show different boards in the floor. So adding in some of those. You won't see many of them, but if you want to add in some difference to some floorboards, then you can do that. So when I'm doing a very loose texture, I hold my pen very differently than when I'm holding it normally. So when you're holding your inking pen for most of it, you want to be very in control of where your lines go. So I'm pressing pretty firmly on it, but when I'm doing loose patterns, I have it very lightly in my hand, and then you get a little bit of a more wavy and natural look to your lines. When you're doing this, they also come out lighter, so it's easier to get some more like fine organic textures in. And now that the floorboard's all done, I'm going to add in a shadow underneath our couch. So I'm just going on the bottom of it and adding in a little bit of a shadow. So I'm going to add in the rug next, and I'm going to follow the same sort of formula that we've been doing where I outline the outside of it and then I add in our details. So you can see on this piece, I added a little leaf motif to the carpet, and I did that very simply, um, just by starting with a circle line like this, and then adding in, you can add in either round shapes, or I like to add in pointy ones. So I do like a half arc and then another half arc and meet them at a point. And I just alternate the leaves. I'm just showing you up a little bit closer up as it might be a little bit small on mine. If you want to add in this pattern, you can. You can also add in like a circle-ish pattern. Well, not a circle-ish, but like a striped sort of pattern. And the way I'm doing that is I'm just doing slightly rounded lines in between the border of my carpet here. And carpets are a great way to add a lot of detail as lots of them are fairly extravagant. So on this second pencil line here, I'm going to add in those leaves. And you can always keep going with your patterns, but I'm going to leave it there for mine. And I'm going to add in more of that fabric texture that we've been adding. But I'm going to do it um, like a little bit bigger, not much bigger, but just enough so it looks like it's a little bit of like a thicker weave material than what the couch is and what the curtains are. And if you do it on top of your design, it'll look like the design is worn in to the carpet as well as like it's all woven together. So yeah. So we're going to start off our bookshelf with this potted plant in the front of it. Like I said, we want to do things sort of in front first. So we're going to start off with this potted plant, and we're going to start off with this potted plant as well, just so we can have those vines in place before we put in the bookshelf. So we're going to start with this plant here and just going around our pencil. And for plants, I'm holding my pen not quite as loose as when we were doing the wood texture, but a little bit looser, just so my lines are a little bit thinner and a little bit more organic. So I'm going to try and add a little bit of a bumpy texture to our dirt here. So I'm just adding in some like M shapes or C shapes, just adding in some bumps and adding in some dots with my pen just to make it look a little bit more like dirt. And then the shadow we're going to add in on the left side of our pot here, and it's going to be most of the whole pot here. I'm coloring in just over half of it. So, and I'm also just coloring in a little bit of the inside of our pot here as well. And I'm just going to add a couple of extra lines here to thin out my shadow just a bit. So from here, I'm going to outline the bookshelf. I'm not going to outline um, lots of the contents other than this one plant first off. So we have these vines in front of our bookshelf in general here. So I'm going to start out with that, just adding in the vines, and then I'm going to outline all of the shelves and the sides of the bookshelf. Oh, I'm just even outlining two of these. And that's just because you can see lots of my pencil is covered by these vines. So I'm not going to draw in the bookshelf behind them. So I'll draw it in the spots where you can still see those lines, but lots of it is left um, blank or just the vines. And that just makes your line work just a tad bit more clean. So from here on your bookshelf, you can add in a little bit of a shadow on your bookshelf on the side like this, or something that you might want to do is add in a wooden texture to it. So this will just make your bookshelf look like it's made of wood instead of like painted on top of. And it's not something you have to do, but it'll just make it look maybe a little bit more rustic or natural looking. And just adding in some texture on such a blank space will help fill up a lot of like blank room. Because otherwise it's just a big empty rectangle, right? So the more detail you can add, the better your art will look. So the other thing I'm going to do is thicken up the left side just a little bit to add a little bit of a shadow, not too much. And that just separates it from the wall behind it. So yeah, just adding some variation. All right, I'm also going to ink this box that I added at the top of my bookshelf. And this was just a little addition that I made um, this week. And it's just to add another height difference. So it's not really adding too much to the piece, but just adding a little bit of variation to the silhouette of the bookshelf. And that's what this plant here does. Oh, I smudged a little bit. It's just adding a little bit of interest to our silhouette. So I'm now moving on to the context or the content of the bookshelf here. So I'm going to outline everything. Um, yeah, and then I will show you guys how I added in all of the shadows. This might take a minute just to add in all of our details. Yeah, I will say when you're adding in books, if you draw each front rectangle of the books, then they'll look varied a little bit. So every rectangle of a book I draw in separately rather than doing them as a whole. And that just adds a little bit of variation to things. So for this plant that I'm drawing in right now, um, rather than drawing each individual petal as a specific petal shape, I'm just adding in little like oval dots instead. So I'm just giving like the impression of leaves rather than the distinct shape of it. I'm also just adding a little bit of wood detail to the front drawers here. Then I will wait for just a second and we will get started on some shadow. All right, so the shadows on our bookshelf are going to be fairly simple. Um, and we're going to start by just coloring in some things. So, for the most part, or for actually for all three of our shelves here, this side of our bookshelf is being colored in completely. So, this back of our bookshelf, this spot here, and this spot up here. So those three spots were coloring in completely. Whoops. And from here, we're going to add in a couple of double lines. So I'm going to add in a line on the sides of the inner corner of the bookshelf. So the line that separates this panel from this one, I'm adding in a line and then coloring in just a little bit of this and then feathering that shadow out just a tad. For this bottom one, I'm coloring it fully in, but actually for all three of them, you can kind of color them in. Um, there's just not much space to add in feathering, so for the bottoms of these, though, we're going to add in some feathering. So I'm going to add in a double line around this here, and then feather out a bit of a shadow here. And doing the same for this top shelf as well. So there is the bookshelf shelf all done. Something you can do as well is just add a little bit of a shadow if you can see the sides of your books like so, or adding uh, like a pattern to this pot or a little bit of a shadow to it. If you're adding a shadow to your pot though, I would try and double line part of it just so you can see where those lines are. And I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow on the floor here by the bookshelf. And I'm going to do a shadow above our bookshelf as well. Just a little one here. I'm exaggerating a little bit just because I put a little box on top of it. I'm also going to add a shadow to that as well. So here is most of our room done. The final step of our pencil to add in is just the ceiling of the room. So I'm going to add that in quickly. But after this is where I often grab my pencil again and add uh, just a few more details if I need to. So you can see on this one, I added in a little picture frame behind this lamp and a tree in this window. So I did that purely with inking, but if you want to go back in with your pencil and add in a picture frame or something up here, and the reason I did that is just to fill out empty space. So sometimes empty space is great, especially if you're coloring, and then you can get some nice like gradients or things going. But if you're just going to add inking, adding in some little things like a tree in the window just adds more character and more depth to your art. So I'm going to add in a tree here. I'm going to add it in a little bit differently, doing more of a silhouette of leaves to start off. So very similar to the bushes that we've been doing and things like that. Or the other thing you could do if you want to make it look a little bit more realistic is adding in a baseboard above the floor or some like, what is it, crown molding on the ceiling. I think that's what it's called, crown molding. And now I just go through and kind of add little textures if I want to. So I'm adding a little bit of a line texture to this box up here. Maybe adding a design to this little pot in front, or adding some more detail to your plants. So if you are going to color this, I would wait for a little while and then erase all of the lines. Um, Waiting just helps your lines kind of seep into your paper more. So I'll show you on this one here. Um, but if you erase on fresher line work, you can kind of erase your line work almost. So you can see how light it is here compared to here. And so that happens when your ink doesn't have enough time to like dry and set fully. So I would give it maybe like an extra hour or two just to let it like really, really soak into the paper. Um, I think I did this at um what like 12 o'clock I did this and it's still rubbing just a little bit, but it's not the best paper for inking. Um, yeah, but I can give you some tips if you'd like for how to color it. I can show you just a little bit, but I would say start with your lighting, whatever you do. So put in shadows and differences first, and then go into other colors. And when you put shadows and stuff first, it's mainly a watercolor technique and an oil paint technique called underpainting, and it just makes your shadows look more natural and richer in your painting. Yeah, so that's usually what I do, is I start with my shadows and then I go to my lightest colors. Um, yeah, so this here is our end product of our inking, and the last um, the last class of our inking unit, and unfortunately the last class of me teaching, like I said. Um, yeah, I really have enjoyed teaching this class. It's taught me a lot, and um, yeah, I'm glad. I'm happy if you guys got anything out of this class, and I have loved seeing you guys grow, and I've loved seeing all of your art that you show me. Christina, that looks great.
When are you going to teach us watercolor?
The last class.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
um, I'm not sure when I'm going to be free to teach again. Um, at my work, I am one of two employees, so it gets very hectic, and um, so as I've been done with my training, that looks great. As I'm done with my training now, I have to take on more at that job, and it's just most of my time is not, it's taken up by that. Angela, that looks great.
Thank you. Thank you. You really teach us a lot. I learned a lot. Thank you.
I'm glad.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Are you done with your class? Pretty much?
Yes.
Okay. So, hi everyone.